Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome, everybody. This is David with Launchpad, and we're back to have another discussion regarding just the unrest that's taking place in our nation, dealing with racism and all the cop issues that we're addressing today. But I'm happy to welcome someone new to the table, which I'm excited for you to meet. And I want to introduce Officer Jeremy. I'm going to butcher your last name, Bohannon.
Yeah, like Shannon.
Bohannon.
That bow.
I got it.
S off.
I like it. So I'm excited to talk with you today, Jeremy, officer, especially because you have a unique perspective being a supporter of Black Lives Matters. And I want you to know right now, I believe in Black Lives Matters. We believe in that, start just from the go. I'm also excited that my good friend, Detective Ray, is with us again. Ray, thanks for being back. We had a good discussion in our last meeting a week ago. But so let's just jump on in, guys. Also, before I start, let me just mention this. I think it's important. This is not really my first rodeo. I've been dealing with community issues going back to to the 80s. And 2005, I wrote a book called Conocer a mi hermano, Meet My Brother. It's about Hispanic immigrants at the time that were, the country was addressing issues of immigration and illegal immigration. So I wrote a book and I was able to travel the country to talk about those things. And so I've always, for the last 20 plus years, been involved in some capacity with community, whether it's empowerment, education, lifting up people, it's in some way. And then I had the great privilege to work for President George W. Bush back in 2001 for the President's Faith-Based and Community Initiatives Program in Washington, D.C. So that being said, this is a topic that's on everybody's mind in our country. And lots of people don't really understand, Officer Jeremy, the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of give me just your understanding of the movement at the moment, just to get us familiar?
So, my understanding and a lot of it's personal perspective and just from my experiences that I've had in my life, Black Lives Matter, the movement has been around for a while. I think a lot of misconceptions is that it's only because of George Floyd. You take it back to Trayvon Martin and all these other instances. And usually when there is something that is like for the public, a national type of thing, that's when you get more people out and you get people protesting out in the street on a national level. This last one was more of a national thing, but what it was is almost like the tipping point or the boiling over point for all of the other issues that kind of fester and have been going on for a long time. So like for me, it's issues with, education, with housing, with not feeling equal, although we should all be equal. It's the denial of racism by a lot of people. When I have a 6-year-old son who's being told at the pool that Black people don't deserve to live, and then a week later I'm being denied to go into a club in a place where I've worked before as a police officer, and my wife being told, since she's Hispanic and she doesn't look like me, she's being told that, hey, don't worry, we're pulling the Black people out of the line. We're wanding them and searching them and charging them to keep you guys safe, right? They didn't know that we were together. And that happened a week after my son had his experience. So these are recent 2019, 2020 type of experiences that we're having. And when you constantly get denied that there is this doesn't happen, we're in a better world, then people start taking to the streets and they're like, hey, we just want to be heard. And so for me, this is more of a, hey, we want to be heard. Now, the problem that we have and what we see with BLM and the protests is that there's a lot of people out there that have no idea what the movement's about. And I'd say 90% maybe. I've gone out there without a uniform just as a regular person, but I still identify myself as an officer because I didn't want people to think I was out there trying to spy. But I had a lot of people come up and talk to me, and about 90% of it was stuff that we already do as a police department, right? And so they don't really understand the issues. But then the 10% was more about, and I had actually a 15-year-old girl that lives in Wimberley who came to me and said, hey, what are you going to do about the systemic injustices that are occurring? What are you going to do about police officers that shouldn't continue to be police officers that keep their job when they do something wrong? But since you have good lawyers and backing from your union and from the state, now they can come back and have their job after they've been fired. You know, little things like that. Why is the education system so messed up? Why is the criminal justice system so messed up? Why do I feel like all of these systems are in place, not for me, but against me? And that's what the movement's about. It's not about George Floyd, although George Floyd is the tipping point to, okay, now this is more of a national movement. Everybody's upset. And now not only, which normally what happens is you only get one side upset. This was the first time when everybody was upset. Didn't matter who you were. And so that was, I feel like it was a time to have a movement to be able to bring to light all of these things that we've been trying to. Kaepernick tried to, but he got shut down. You know, LeBron James tried to talk about it, but he got told to shut up and dribble. You know, and so it's people that have a platform that are able to, hey, okay, now we need to start going out and try to help influence some of these changes so that we can all feel like we're all equal. And that's what BLM movement is to me.
That's so good. That's good. You know, and then what I like about this is that I'm getting a perspective from you as, you know, African-American gentleman and law enforcement, you know, on this perspective. So that's huge, Jeremy. I think that really helps some people understand where you're coming from and the movement itself. I just kind of wanted to ask Ray, as a police officer, you know, you've been not on necessarily marches with BLM, but you've been on the other side with the protesters of this. What's that like for you? What's that like for an officer, you know, on that side of the
right?
issue?
And I've been on both sides because I went out with Jeremy.
Oh, did you?
We were speaking with some of the protesters as well. But what for me, I think that there is a lot of misinformation. Okay. And so while I believe wholeheartedly that Black Lives Matter, the organization itself, I disagree with a lot of the points that the organization uses. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know that the people that are there are bad or anything else. I just think that they have misinformation. So the major things that are affecting the community today within policing and that sort of thing, and what Jeremy was hitting on, where the 15-year-old was pretty spot on, right? There are issues in the community, but I don't know that they're steeped in racism as much as they may disparately affect certain communities than others. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I think when we're looking at BLM, you talked about LeBron James. LeBron James recently put out a tweet that said we're literally being hunted down. Yep. Let me see. I sent it over.
Yeah, you said every time we step foot outside the comfort of our homes, we're literally being hunted down. Can't even go for a damn jog, man. What the F? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So again, I think that,
you know what that tweet was about.
Yeah, that was about the Ahmaud.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So, but the thing is that to not look at things and that would be a whole nother conversation. You know what happened with that.
Right.
Whether you think it's right or wrong, and I don't think it's right for people to try and. But anyway, it's a whole nother side. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is that to say literally we're being hunted down is I think that's factually inaccurate, and it puts fear into people. There are situations in this country where bad things happen to people, right? But if you look at the facts, you look across the country, you're going to look at just generally American citizens live a very safe life. Now, when you start coupling things on it, you start going into inner cities and certain cities, and you start putting other things, you're going to see that safety goes way down, right? The things that are hurting minorities, when you start looking at the list of what's going on, white people killing black people is not very high on that list. Anytime it happens is a tragedy that anybody dies. But what's really killing our people, and again, when I look at Americans, I'm going to say my people at anything, blacks, whites, whatever, I'm American. Exactly. So what's killing our blacks and our Hispanics in our communities are high levels of gang violence and shootings that are occurring in our major cities. All the way to the point where it's so much so that it's the number one cause of death for a black person under the age of 25. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a white person, it'll be accidental, like a car accident or something like that.
Drownings. Yeah.
All right, this is an epidemic numbers.
No, I get it.
Right. So police shootings, police misconduct, and everything else, these are not on epidemic numbers. Every time it happens, it's tragic, but it's not on epidemic numbers. So the way you would handle these are different ways. We should be going micro into those police departments, figuring out what's going on with these horrible police officers that stayed on top of that man for 8 minutes and 40 seconds, right? That was awful, right? So that should be looked at and figure out. Police unions and stuff like that, yeah, these are very good debates to have and see how can we move forward. But to act like there hasn't been any progress is crazy, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Policing is at its best that it's ever been.
Yep.
We're looking at black people being shot in America is gone down 75% over the past 40 years or so, right? So that there's been huge progress. So when we're saying, I believe that Black Lives Matter is not focusing on the things that we really need to be focusing. One, yes, how do we police our communities and everything else? But even more so, what are we doing with the horrible things that are happening in our communities in this country?
So that being said, Jeremy, regarding Chicago, which is glaring.
Glaring.
What is Father's Day weekend? There were 100 shootings, 14 deaths, a 3-year-old child, boy, oh my God, just unbelievable. Just this past weekend in Chicago, 61 shootings, another 13 deaths. Where's Black Lives Movement and focus in those situations?
So
do you know?
Yeah, I don't. And here's the thing. Like for me, like we're talking about the organizational, actual organization, right? Okay. I personally, I don't even really, because I share the same sentiments as far as police killings and police, and I take a step further back behind that, right? So I take a step behind, and why I'm able to, and this is what I use when I was out there with people, like, do you take your badge off, you're part of a system, blah, blah. Look, I understand, but I think me being in this role gives me a broader understanding of policing, right? So I know that that's not a problem, right? I know that police shootings, police killings, I know that we're not, as police officers, going out and hunting people. I know that we're super progressive in the city of Austin, and I know that there's thousands of other police departments that first need to get to our level of progressiveness, because I know when I leave Austin in this area that I may get into a police department that doesn't have body cams or accountability or looks at me a lot different than if we were actually in the city of Austin. So that's why I can proudly wear my badge and I can proudly wear my uniform every single day and continue to do the work that I'm trying to do, right? So I get that part, and that's where I know that on the BLM side, or even just community or whatever you want to call it, I know that there are people out there with that type of message saying, hey, we want to kill cops. Hey, they're killing us. I know that. But I also know on the police side and on the other side that we have people with the same message. 99% of Black people are aggressive. We know that because we actually heard him say it, right? So we know that there are officers out there, there are people on this side that don't fully understand, like, people of color, and there's people of color that don't fully understand policing, right? And so the same thing that you're saying of Black Lives Matter, there's people on that side saying, well, how can you do this when they're doing this and this is happening, this is happening? When they don't understand, they're using, may say, Austin as, the kind of the scapegoat for what happens in Minneapolis or Chicago or anywhere else, right? So that's one thing. So I'm on your side with that, and I understand that. Now, on another level, I take it back and I speak to the numbers that we're talking about. Chicago, we're talking about, Black on Black crime, which is messed up because there's white on white crime, Hispanic on Hispanic crime, there's Italian on Italian crime. It's more of a proximity type of thing, right? And so when kind of, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, so if you take a step back, right, and you think about what happened even after all of slavery and like the things that were put in place, like we talked about earlier, redlining, right? What that does is just imagine putting crabs in a barrel, right? And only given a certain amount of resources for a few people to make it. But dude, when you're fighting for scraps, you're fighting for scraps. And it was a big thing back then. Look at what happened in California, when crack cocaine came on the scene. Nobody had planes to go get crack cocaine and bring it in and, you know what I mean, and learn how to do. But there's little things that have happened throughout our history that has created this crab in a barrel, where the only people who are getting out, like myself, are athletes, entertainers, People who do something for somebody else, like, oh, he's cool. The only reason why I was brought to the table sometimes, or even went to college, a good college, was because I played sports. My friends that didn't play, they didn't go to college. Why? Because we didn't grow up talking about financial literacy, because we were in that second or third generation of families just trying to start building, trying to figure out how to build wealth, trying to getting our first properties as a family, because we were never allowed to own property before to be able to get that wealth. And so now what you have is these communities of people who are fighting for resources. And like at the beginning, it started with the gangs, and then the gang culture took over. Why? Even for me, like, I didn't grow up in California. I didn't grow up in Chicago, New York, but the culture, I drew to it because it was somebody I identified to, right? I identified with, NWA and Jay-Z and everybody else, because I identified with them, right? And so when they're talking and they're like, hey, this is how I got out. This is how I made it. This is what I did to get out. You can do it too, right? Now, reverse that with somebody else that has wealth behind them, maybe a couple of CEOs in their family, everything else. Then they're like, hey, oh, you want this plane? Okay, this is how you do taxes. This is how you know what I mean? Like, you're getting that information at home, where for me, I didn't get it from home. Why? Because my dad was hooked on crack. My mom had to work 3 jobs to take care of all of us, and everybody else in my, go to the church, and everybody else was kind of struggling on their own, trying to make it, trying to figure out, hey, is this the right thing to do? Right? Because nobody really, there wasn't the knowledge, the information wasn't coming in there. We didn't have the resources. The schools were different. Everything was different. And so I think what happens is when people talk about, oh, well, your culture, it's like, yeah, but you have to kind of look at it from a broader perspective of, okay, why did this happen? Was it because, hey, when you guys were done with slavery, we don't want you to guys to advance that much. So let's put you in this little area right here. All right, let's put the liquor stores and everything else there. Let's introduce drugs. Let's introduce guns. Let's introduce these things. And now let's see what happens, right? It's like, to me, it's almost like it's an experiment that somebody needs to come out and be like, hey guys, we messed up. Like, this was wrong. We shouldn't have done this. And it's led to what we see today, the stats and the inequalities. And now once you have that, yeah, crime's going to go high because you're fighting. Now police officers are here because you look at CompStat, we're going after their percentages. Okay, well, this rose here. Okay, now we have to put police here. This rose here, so now we have to put police here. But when you put people on top of people on top of people, what do you think is going to happen? That's where you get those stats, and that's why policing is heavier in those areas. And we see it in Austin today. That's why Baker sector and Charlie sector are 2 totally different sectors, and they're 2 miles apart.
So I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of things that you're saying that are right, but I think some of these things, there's more nuance to it. First of all, putting the police officers in the areas, it actually helps those areas more than it hurts. So if you look at problem-oriented policing that came out in the late 70s, or where they were trying to figure out, okay, how do we figure out what are the root cause problems to these areas, right? You had a guy, Herman Goldstein, that came up with this idea of really almost taking like a scientific method to the whole thing, right? And eventually, police department out of Virginia, Newport News, came up with a SARA model, which is scan, analyze, respond, and assess, right? And so by doing this, police officers were able to become highly effective in improving communities, whether it's lowering crime or improving race relations and that sort of thing. I think technology hurt us in a sense. Like, at first it was good, but in a sense it started to hurting us because we could then respond to more things faster. We could do more with less, and we started to become detached from the community. So there's some other things just in policing, regardless if it's black or white or anything else.
Can I give you like just a second while we're still on this one? Like, I agree with you 100% on that. However, where I'm going to basically throw my perspective in is, when you get the policing, right? Like, yes, okay, we're going to these high crime areas. What happened with those high crime areas? What did they take away from those high crime areas to bring the crime rate low?
So I'll get the very place that you brought up. You brought CompStat. CompStat was created in New York City. The reason being is that they were trying to figure out where are these issues happening? Exactly. Where do we need to put the police? Yeah. At that time, New York City's crime was so crazy. It wasn't a matter of if you would get mugged or something else. It was when. Like, it was so bad. Yeah. It was so bad. I grew up through it, right? Okay, so they then increased the police department to 35,000. They put cops in these grids everywhere, and those police officers had to know their grid, right? And so you get going back to the Peelian principles of being a part of your community and everything else. That's not to say they did everything right? That these things, there were some bad things like stop and frisk that came up from this thing, but it freed people to be able to go to school, to not get stabbed and killed and everything else. Okay. As a nation, we went through and we started to see, and we had these conversations like, hey, we messed up. Well, what do we do? All right. So we have things like affirmative action. We have things like the Equal Lending Act, and there are these things that we put in place to say, hey, let's do better. Right. And because of these things, we've seen rapid movement, right, outside of these communities with minorities going up. And so we come to today and we see a remarkably low unemployment rate in the Black community and everything else. We see Black females actually do better in school than even white females. I believe there are certain studies that show these things. And so there is a movement. Right. Yeah. And so there are things that this is the nuanced part of it. There are things that are still there that are hurting our communities. Right. But there are ways out. And it's not just athletics or anything else, because from looking at you and me, I was never going to get an athletic scholarship, but I was able to get a scholarship to go to school. Right.
Definitely.
Right. Yeah. So there is movement. What's hurting our communities now is that when we do go to college, you don't just need athletics to go. We could get there's top Pell, there's grants, you could go.
But here, I'll give you that. I didn't know anything about that.
But you may not have.
Didn't know anything.
But you may not have. But there's ways. What I'm saying is that when they go to college, they don't come back to that community. If you go to college and now you're making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, you're not going to go back to the projects. Right.
You're right.
Okay, so we have a constant movement out. And then people are moving into more affluent neighborhoods, and that community is still hurting. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, we're dealing with the ramifications of racism, but it's not necessarily racism. The biggest things that's hurting our community right now is drugs, gangs, right, and violence. The violence that comes from those things, that's what's hurting our community. It's not white people doing it.
No, nobody's saying that it's white people or anything else. I'll give you this simple thing, right? I agree with you 100%, and I don't believe that, we're in 2020 and things are way better. There's a lot of things in place. Right. However, as a Black person, when I see two people doing the same crime and one person gets a lot more time than the other, and I see it happen over and over and over and then over and then over again, and then on top of that, I start seeing people being exonerated after 20 or 30 years being locked up, over and over and over again, and it's almost like a repeated record where it happens 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. Or when you're just like, wow, like how is all of this stuff still going on and nobody's saying, hey, there's a red flag? That's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when police come into the neighborhood, right? What we're doing as police officers. We go in because of a crime or because we have to be there. They're saying this is where you have to be. Now, what happens from that? It's not police killings. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is the things that we all know have occurred and probably still do, not in Austin though. Like, okay, if they run from you, make sure they go to the hospital, right? That's police brutality, right?
It is.
Another form of police brutality that never gets talked about, you stop somebody. Yeah, they may have 5 or 6 things that are going on, but a normal person like myself, I always do this. I'm only going to put like one, maybe on the booking sheet, maybe one thing. If you hit me and we fight and I take it to the ground and I'm not really hurting, I'm not going to put assault on a PO. That's a felony. I'm not even going to say you resisted arrest. I'm just going to be like, hey, it's a mental health issue. Let's take him to the hospital, or whatever the actual reason that was. That's one charge. But do we see that all the time? No, we see 5, 6 charges. And I can't,
Is this based on race?
I don't know, because you know what? That's what I want to look at, right? I want to look at that because look, it doesn't, to me, it's not about race. And to me, Black Lives Matter isn't about race. It's about marginalized communities, which includes poor white people, includes immigrants, includes Black people. It includes people that when they did redlining, it wasn't just black people have to be here. It's people that we don't feel desirable for our society right now, right? So if you're crazy, if you're a poor white person, if you're an immigrant, these are the people who we are pushing over here, right? And now we're sending police over because the crime is so high, because there's this crab in a barrel type of thing, because they can't come over, they can't go do other things, that you don't have as much access to wealth equality, to the good schools, to information. Now we're bringing them here, and like, yes, police in general, we want to do the right thing, right? Like, officers want to do the right thing, and sometimes you have to have policies in place as a department, which I feel like we have most of them. Pretty much, I'd say if you're looking at an uploading screen of like, hey, you can be a great department, we're at like 90-something%. Sure. But the problem I have is that there's some that are at 40. And those are what scare me, and those are what are fluttered around this country, right? And that's what breeds your Ahmaud Arbery's, right? Your Trayvon Martins and stuff like that, where it's like, those aren't police issues.
But both of those were not.
They're not. But look at this. When you are told, because you're not around these people, right? Mm-hmm. So when you see on the media, oh, look, black people are aggressive, or, reefer madness. Remember all that stuff? Like, when you are fed all of these things, these minstrel shows showing that the black people they're the ones that are out trying to rape your people. You know what I mean? Like, when you see that, and then you look at the incarceration rate of what's the number for people of color? I mean, it's astronomical, right? Which is a modern day slavery to me. I call it that. I'm not saying that people are racist and bringing them in for that, but what I'm saying is that, like, what's happening is it's like we had talked about earlier, like, slavery will be, the sin that we have to pay for. And I feel like right now we're paying for it because after slavery, there was a large period of time, almost up until close to now, where there are a lot of people in this country that are afraid of black people. There are people that are afraid of me when I get on the elevator, and they clench, or they don't want me to be somewhere, which I just told you about my racial experience that I had. There are people in America that don't, because you're not around us. Or if you are, you're probably in an office, and because of affirmative action, there's a few of us littered around in there, and we are pretty much code switching so that you don't see who I truly am, but I'm trying to conform to you so that you don't think that I'm aggressive or a bad person. You know what I mean? Like, it's those types of things where people are just like, okay, look, I don't want to have to do this. Like, I don't want to have to do what you did, Officer Bohannon, to get your job, when you had to clean up and you had to cut your braids off, and you did all this so that you look more desirable as an applicant, right? That's what I'm talking about. It's not about how many people police kill, how many people white or black kill. It's just the narrative and the overall picture that is shown of people of color, of immigrants who are rapists. And like, my wife's first generation American. She got 4.0 at UT. She did a bang up job on her GRE and her SATs and all that stuff. 4.0 in college, 4.0 in high school. But she had to work hard for it, right? Mm-hmm. But she also understands that, hey, when people are showing or looking at me they don't look at me as an immigrant, but they look at my parents as an immigrant. And when they look at them and they talk to them and they hear their accent, they're automatically, you're from Mexico, you work in a field, and so she's grown up with all of that. And so even her being super highly educated and could be a principal if she wanted to, and probably be a superintendent if she really wanted to do all that, but she loves working with kids. Like, when she also sees it as somebody who is pretty dang successful, she does a lot. When she also, from her life experiences, sees that, and it's like, look, it's not that the world is against us, or it's like we're getting hunted down. I don't believe that, but I do feel like it's just the narrative that is pushed out, the rhetoric that is pushed out about people of color is not a good one.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so
there was a lot to that.
There was a lot, and I go on, and I go on. Please, I'm with you. I go on.
Go ahead and
I don't write stuff. I'm like, it just comes out of wherever it comes out of.
Let me try and get all the way back to the Black Lives Matter. So part of the issue is that it's these things that what it means to you or what it means to this person or that person, right? But as far as the organization goes, they are really talking about Black lives, right? So the About website, I've been going through the Black Lives Matter website trying to understand like what's going on. So their About part, which is saying what they're about, right? It says Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murder. Black Lives Matter Foundation, Inc. is a global organization, US, UK, Canada, whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes. So in this section where I'm talking about, it's like they're not talking about like whites or this. They're talking about just black lives. And then the main things that they're talking about is white supremacy and build local power to intervene on violence inflicted on black communities. So the very things that you're saying that you care about, which I would agree with too. Like, you know, we want to make sure that people are welcomed and everything else. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about violence, and this is why I was saying those numbers. Is like, look, the numbers are not showing that there's violence against black people. I mean, there is violence against anybody, but to an extent where it's an epidemic. That's not what's happening. The other thing is that when we're talking about white supremacy, if I care about helping communities, this is why I got into the job, right? So what do we need to do? Where do we go? What's the logical path to take if we want to help these communities? And fighting against white supremacy, that's not what's hurting our communities. Yeah. Right? So again, number one, let me put it this way. A guy gets shot, right? And he's in the hospital and he's bleeding out. And I think we all would agree reading is important, right? To be able to read and write is important. Absolutely. We'll agree with that? Okay. If the person is bleeding out and they're trying to, and then they find out somehow that he can't read, do you say, stop, get that away from him? We got to teach this man how to read and write, right? Okay, so yes, if an officer has shot someone and it was not right, or kneeling on somebody that's not right, those are problems, and we need to address those problems. But when we're looking at 7,000 blacks being shot and killed in this country every year, right? Of that, 200 are police shootings, and of the 200 police shootings, I mean, you have people that are shooting at the cops. So of that, you have about 9. You have 9 that are unarmed, and even in those, there's situations where someone's driving over somebody. So even of those, in 2019, 2 officers were charged. In this situation over here, all 4 people were fired. All 4 officers were fired, and then charges were brought onto them within a week or so, or something like that. That would have happened regardless of the protests or not. That policing has been changing. Okay, but what has not been changing, right, is that we know George Floyd, we know Philando Castile, we know Mike Brown, we know these names, right? But if I ask you, what's the name of the 3-year-old that died a week ago in Chicago, was shot in the chest, that little man's life ripped from him. All the potential ripped from him. He's a young black kid, right? What's his name? Do we know? Do we know? Does anybody know? Don't. That's my problem. All right. And so when I'm saying there are things that we need to be taking care of our community, and what Black Lives Matter is pushing is they say that they want to defund police. They want smaller police. No, we need more police officers. We need community police officers to go back to Peel. Do we know who Peel is? So the creation of policing was created by the Metropolitan Police, and there's a man, Sir Robert Peel, that came up with these principles. And these principles make total sense, and like be a part of the community. Only use the force that the community would say is necessary to be able to. It's these things make sense, right? Yeah. We need more police officers in smaller districts so that when I'm dealing with someone, I know
know who they are,
right? And so we're going the wrong way, and that's what I'm trying to say to be able to save those lives. That's what I'm trying to do.
And I agree with you 100% with that. And so that's why, like, I've been a huge proponent of the educational piece of, hey, we still need to, because I agree, like, that's not, the violence is not the thing. And I've always said that from the beginning. I'm like, look, I understand what you're trying to do, but right now you have people who don't understand policing at all, or even want to look at it, to be able to come up with more logical types of things. And that's why I believe that's why you don't have, even in Austin, you have a lot of other justice organizations that don't full-heartedly, because, you know, we have some of the biggest activists here that say, hey, we know we have one of the best departments. We can be a little bit better. You know what I mean? So they know that's not happening. And I think that's why these groups aren't really, because you can't give me 10, you can name off 10 people on the top of the organization. I have no idea who you're talking about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So really it's not, or it's like, yeah, they were able to take this name and this is what they've been able to create over here. But if you pull back and look at Measure Austin, you look at Boys and Girls Club, you look at all these other, you know, even your organization that are doing things in the community every single day, because they understand that it's not a, hey, all the resources here are available for you, go at it. Why aren't you doing better for yourself? You know what I mean? But that's where
we have to pay attention to these things, because the person that is the co-founder, Patrice Collins, is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. She's a self-proclaimed Marxist. Yeah. There's a reason why, if you look out there, that Antifa is so well aligned with BLM, right? And so these young kids out there, a lot of them, they don't know what's going on. Yeah. If this country was so racist, I mean, I can show you pictures of crowds of people saying that they want justice, and you know, 6 out of 10,
6 out of 8 out of 10, probably,
are white.
And
right?
and that's why I say, like, I don't believe that people are just outright just racist all the time, right? I know that it happens because I have experiences with it, but I just know that, like, and I tell people, even when we had our situation in our department last year, I told everybody I knew, like, look, I haven't had any bad or racist experiences as a police officer. And I haven't seen it. I've never seen an officer just blatantly just do something that I thought was racist, right? Mm-hmm. I know that there are things within policing that somebody could do to, if they, you know, I don't like somebody or whatever, like, you could do a little bit extra to them, whether it be more charges or whatever, or even lie, or, you know what I mean? And so I know that those things can happen and can easily happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I look at it, and that's why I try to do what I can, because I tell people all the time, you can support the police, you can even support Donald Trump, and still also support Black Lives Matter. You know, but you have to educate, just like what you're talking about. And this is why I told you, like, I love talking to you, because you come with a lot of, like, really good facts and really good information that now I can take back to my people and be like, yo, this is, like, you got to understand this, because I'm trying to do it on a, hey, look, well, you need policing, right? And I actually created something for our department, basically going back to the Peel era, was like, hey, policing or community policing needs to be infused throughout your entire police department as an organizational structural philosophy from the person who just started all the way to the chief, and everybody has to be involved with it, and it has to be citywide, right? That's what has to happen. Yeah. And so when we talk about defunding the police, it's easy to go in and let people know, hey, look, as a police officer, as a community police officer for the last 6 to 7 years, I have always viewed myself as a liaison for resources. I'm like, okay, I was a police officer. I can go to this house and deal with this, talk to people and be like, okay, hey, you 10-year-old, you should probably go and, like, let's get you hooked up. There's a STEM club right here. Let's do that. You as a parent, hey, I got this parenting organization right here. Oh, your daughter has a little mental health issue. Look, we can skip the hospital. There's a place right down the street. It's called African American Youth Harvest Foundation. And they have a great mental health facility. They've got 4 counselors on duty 24/7. You can call them. You can do, like, as a police officer, that's how I think, right? And so I don't think I'm perfect. Like, I don't think I'm, like, the ideal cop, right? I'm not the SWAT guy. I'm not the tactical. But with the things that I do when I dance on TikTok and all that is doing, like, all of those things, that is basically just allowing me to gain the trust from people who don't like police officers to, like, humanize the badge a little bit. Yeah. So then now they're willing to listen to me. Now they're willing to DM me when they have a problem, mental health, whatever it is. Right. And so if we as police officers see ourselves as the link between the community and all of the resources that are available, and then help to identify where resources are needed, that's where we take away, like, I'm not saying you take away enforcement, all that stuff, but once you start to do that, start to infuse everybody with the information that is needed to be able for them to be successful in their own way, and not feel like, oh, like, because I'm this, I can only do this, because a lot of people still feel that way. Now you're lowering crime. Well, but it's a generational thing.
Let me ask you, you got a toolbox? How many hammers you got in your toolbox?
4.
Yeah. How many other tools do you have?
Bunch.
Tons, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's not like you don't need a hammer, but the hammer, you can't use that hammer for screwing in a screw. For everything. Okay. I totally agree with that. The problem is that the modern day patrol officer, because of how we use the CAD system. CAD system is a computer automated dispatch. So a computer, it pops up all these calls, and then we respond to the calls. Because we've become so technologically advanced, we can do more with less. So we have now grown from the time even you've been here. You've been here for about 10 years, right?
12 years.
12.
Well, eight and a half at APD, but 4 or something. So
in this time in Austin, we've grown almost the same size as Tulsa, Oklahoma, the entire city. We've grown about 600,000 people. Right? We went from 650,000. We're over 1 million now. Our metropolitan area is at 2.5 million.
The time he's been here, you're saying?
Since I moved here,
Right. So there's rapid growth, but the department hasn't grown. If anything, they're trying to make it go back the other way. So what happens is that because you and I, we have access to resources, so we can say, you're a veteran, you don't have your DD 214, don't worry. I know the lady at the VA right here. I'm gonna connect her up with you. That patrol officer can't do that. He's going call to call to call. So you're not David anymore. Your case number 201995553. And so the things that we're trying to put in place, saying that we need more social workers, we need this and that. You're not going to be able to get to that if you don't have the officers trained and able to go in and handle these situations. This is what will truly save our minority communities. When we started the program that we started to go to the schools. We brought all the schools together and we surveyed the schools and we asked the kids. We had 5th grade girls saying that they're getting catcalled by the homeless when they're on their way to school. And home from school. At what point does that kid stop going to school? So we put officers on the street. You work it. We put officers on the street and we say, this day, everybody's safe. You're going to get home from school. You're going to this, and that. And we open these arteries up and then the community can start using it and then it becomes safe. Right? And we're a part of the request of the community. Same thing. Let's say they say, look, I'm scared to go to the supermarket because there's all this drug dealing over here. And we survey the community. We're talking and they say, this is what I need. And we come in and we help out. And we go in and we deliberately go to the people that are breaking the crime. Historically, what we'll do is we say, we have a lot of violence over here. Everybody that's jaywalking, everybody that's doing this, zero tolerance. We're going to go and we alienate our communities. This isn't on race. It just
whoever's there.
Just hardly affects
doesn't matter who you are.
And that's the problem. That's the misinformation. And coming back full circle is that if we need our adults, we need our stakeholders, our leaders in the community. We need LeBron James to cut it out and learn more because he has more of a voice. And I'm not saying that's a bad man. He's done a lot. No. He's done a lot for people. But if you're going to put that voice out there, you need to know what's really going on and come and help the police department be better.
And that kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier. We have people with huge voices that aren't doing that for both sides.
Right.
Huge voices. Like literally can just the entire country, everybody's going to listen. So when I see, former officers who are black on Twitter who've got 5, 10, 20 million people following them and they say, these guys need to cut it out. They're just complaining. Let's go to war. Let's fight. And just imagine if and this is what I tell people all the time. I'm in the middle, right? I'm pro-police. I'm pro-community. I'm just trying to bring everybody together so that they can understand both sides and not be one-sided, right? But I know that as soon as I go one-sided, right? And I could do it either way. As a police officer, everybody be like, oh, look at him, blah, blah. As a black man, oh, look at him, blah, blah, blah. Put you on the pedestal so now you can start feeding whoever's coming up with this mastermind of doing this and keeping the divisiveness to keep it going. Then I would go viral, right? I would go viral because now I've got a whole half a base like, hey, look, this guy's saying this. That's where you get your Kanye Wests. That's where you get that Officer Tatum dude, or that's where you get your Candace Owens, and that's where you get the video I told you. It was completely one-sided. You know what I mean? Like completely one-sided, where it's just like, dude, if you can't even talk about both sides, then I don't want to listen. You know what I mean? Because it's like you're just blocking yourself from that, and that's what's creating this us versus them, which creates the, hey, which now I get people telling me, hey, like the Civil War, if it happens, like what side are you going to take? But you know what I mean? It's like, no, like people need to have better information on both sides, on all sides.
I agree.
That's good.
You know, and that's how we can make the world a better place. Like not being one or the other, but coming in and just understanding everything, or at least trying to, or opening yourself up to listening. And now we can start figuring out how we can, because like what you just said, you would never get to if you had somebody that was just automatically like, man, forget the police. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same thing on the other side. Like, nah, forget them. They're not talking. Like, how can we better? You know what I mean? And it's like you have to get more people to come into the middle. It's not a political thing. It's just more people coming into the middle of humans and understanding why people feel this way on one side and why people feel this way on the other side.
So that being said, you know, I'm the oldest guy at the table most of the time, which sucks, but that's the way it is. But anyway, we'll
be there one day, I guess.
So, you know, growing up, again, as a young Latino kid in the South, in Austin, okay, in a white community, you know, things were tough. Things weren't easy. And the thing was, at that time, racism was pretty much acceptable. It was okay that being called names was acceptable anywhere you went. Okay. That was the way it was. But what you had to learn to do is, you know, you can hate, and I fought a lot of people because I got tired of being called the slurs. You know, after a while, you fight back. But then you get tired. You can't fight everybody, so you got to do something different. So in my case, you know, you learn how to maneuver. You learn how to grow from this. Yep. If you think about the '60s, think about the music industry during the most, you know, the civil unrest of our day with race riots and the Vietnam War riots and civil rights, all that was going on. Assassinations, JFK, MLK, Robert Kennedy, you know, prominent people in our nation. And in spite of all that, some of the most beautiful music was being created in the black community, the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, you name the bands, the Spinners, you know, they were able to thrive in the midst of chaos. Much more chaos. I'm not trying to downplay what's happening today because it's real. But I promise you, living it, watching it every day, watching war for the first time in America in the evening was the first time Vietnam War was ever televised. First time in American history. Every single night, the war in Vietnam, the Viet Cong, blah, 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 the assassinations, the rioting. That's the world I grew up in. That's my purview of America. But that being said, in the midst of a white neighborhood, we were able to talk. We were able to find some unity in white friends who didn't care about skin color. Skin color was a big thing back then. You were judged left and right. I was asked many times, got too many Mexicans in here, you guys need to wait outside. Okay. You know, was it right? No way. But did it destroy me? Did it? I didn't live on a crutch the rest of my life. I didn't say because I've been treated, I've got to live on this crutch. My mom in 1965, a Latina, single mom, was able to buy a home in a white community in 1965 in Austin, Texas. That's pretty much, that's unheard of. A lady, a female, number one. They were second-class citizens back then. You know, they just barely got a right to vote not too long before that. But they were second-class citizens. She had a sixth grade education. She had a lot of limitations in front of her. Didn't stop her. But my point is that we were able to find some level ground and a way to bridge our conversations in a highly, highly toxic turmoil time in our nation. And through that, we were able to make advances in my personal life. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, and I think it's important to both communities, Latino and Black communities, which is, you know, the Latino population is about 17.5% at the moment. African Americans about 12 to 13% in the U.S. nationwide. And yet there's 40% of single homes with dependent children in the Hispanic community, and there is 70% of single parent homes with dependent children in the Black community. There are about 15 million children that are raised without fathers in the United States right now. 71% of all high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. And then 70% of juveniles are in state-operated institutions have no involved fathers. And of course, then from there, of course, you have children who have trouble academically. They don't test well in math and reading, and thinking skills, and they're more likely to be truant. So these are some very real issues that are prevalent in our minority communities today. But that being said, there is still, I do believe now more than ever, because I've seen the past and I've seen today. And I can tell you, there are greater opportunities for people today. Not to downplay what you just shared.
Yeah.
Because that's real. And that's important.
Yeah.
And people have to understand where people live and where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, I want to say, first of all, we're all the human race. And we're all human beings. And we have to find a way to meet there. And then we come together as a nation, as Americans, and have these important dialogues that both of you are doing today. And I do believe that there are compromises that still have to be made, advancements that still need to be made. But I just think at the moment we have such a high level of toxicity of pointing fingers and labeling that we can't hear each other.
So there's more stats to that, right? Let's continue it on. So we're looking at the single parent household rates, right? And then we say, well, blacks account for anywhere from 70 to 74% single parent household rates. Well, what about Nigerians? When you start breaking it down even further, in Nigerians, that's almost flipped the other way. Okay? And then you're looking at, I think it's somewhere around 15% of Nigerians have a master's degree.
Yeah.
Okay. Nigerians have a higher household income than whites, than the average white. Okay. So it's not just a race thing.
It's not.
Because if it was, the Nigerians would not be right. So there's a cultural thing going on, right?
Yeah.
And we break down these statistics. Over 50%, that officer was way off in his numbers with the 99%. But it is over 50% of homicides are attributed to blacks, right? And they make up 13% of the population. But here goes the thing. We know that males commit by far more violent crime than females. So let's cut that number in half. So now we're looking at 6%. Now, obviously, not every black male is out there committing homicides, right? So we have to take even a smaller percentage of that. So we go down 1%, 2%, I don't know. You go there and you're saying, oh my God, right? This is a hyper-violence happening with a very small percentage of our population, all right? This is where we need to start looking at saying, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? And then start to be able to
go forward.
Go forward.
So I like where you took that, but I think we glossed over a huge disparity. When you come and say Nigerians are here and they master's degrees, they're doing so much well off. Why are they able to do that? But then you have other people that aren't. Well, I know you didn't say it. That's my question. Oh, okay. My question is, and I have an answer.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're talking about Nigerians who are coming over maybe first, second generation Nigeria, because you're saying they're Nigerian, so obviously they're coming from the continent on their own here, right? So they're coming from with their own culture that they've built over for centuries, their own understanding of everything and all that, centuries worth of stuff, right?
That's true.
Now, as an American, my grandfather, right? So you were talking about centuries for Nigerians. Here in America, my grandfather was a veteran, right? If you look at his U.S. census, me and my brother pulled it up. He's got about 8 of them. Our last name is spelled 6 different ways.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. And that's because his father and his mother weren't allowed to read and write. They were, it was like they were just now learning how to write. Okay. Right. So their culture taken away. They don't have. You're not bringing none of the culture here from African Americans or black people in America are from centuries past. It's brand new stuff. Like our culture has been built from like the 60s on, and like it's like we're always trying to find some type of identity because we don't have one, right? I can't. My grandfather doesn't. He doesn't. His dad was like. He doesn't even remember. Like he's like, yeah, there was really no culture. We were just kind of doing what everybody else was doing. My last name. That was just something given because that's where we, our slaves, and that's a slave last name. Like we don't, you know what I mean? So that's the difference. That's why Nigerians can come, because people here in America have been put in the barrel.
My point was not.
I know.
My point is that
your path is going
racism,
forward from. It's not racism, and that's what I'm saying. Like that in itself is not because of race. It is because of what has happened after slavery. Like what has happened here in America, and that's where we have to figure out where we go forward from.
I agree with you. There's no 100% way to overcome slavery.
No, there's not.
So we're never going to be.
It's the acknowledgement.
Yeah,
it's just
should.
And the problem that I see is there's no acknowledgement that once it was done, right, and from the late 1800s all the way to about 19 something, and even going on today, there are a lot of remnants of keeping people enslaved, right? A lot of remnants by the crab in the barrel thing, the red line, all that stuff. You look at the prison system and why there's so many people. Once slaves were able to be free, then what happened? Now we started criminalizing people of color, criminalizing immigration and immigrants and putting them in. Now what are they? Now they're slaves again. Why? Because now if my farm lost all of its slaves, now I can't have slaves anymore. It's illegal. Okay, I can't do all this work on my own. How am I going to get people to come work? And before slavery, the criminal justice system or the prison system was what, 70, 80% white, like 90% white. After slavery, it flipped 80 to 90% black, right? Because now it's like, hey, you're getting in trouble for everything. You came to the wrong side of the street. You did this, you did that. Now you're enslaved. Now you can be used on these farms again as labor, capitalism.
But,
now,
but it's not capitalism.
Okay, whatever the word is. You're making money. You're making money.
It's important to know though how this really worked out, because that didn't happen. That transfers didn't happen automatically. This happened systematically over years, and this was over a course of where you had Jim Crow and everything else. So this then there's two different things going on. So you have that after slavery all the way up into the early 1900s, and then we're looking at after World War II moving forward, and we go into the civil rights movement. Again, the second hit on blacks and minorities in this country is with LBJ and linking these permanent social systems on the black and Hispanic communities, right? And then that's where we broke the family apart again. Yeah. So we broke it apart in slavery, and then again we're doing it, right? So then now we have this welfare state, and you have people that are saying, like, they would come do checks. My father talks about it too. They would come into the house and say, okay, is there a man in the house? If there was a man in the house, you lose your check, right? Exactly. Okay, so we break apart these, and this is why I'm saying this is cultural. It's cultural now for a man to not take care of, obviously not every black family, but it's culturally acceptable for a woman gets pregnant and the man bounces, right? That's not right, right? So if we're gonna fix,
but how did that get created?
That was over the welfare state.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. This is basically, we're saying the same exact thing. Yeah. What I'm saying is that you have this entity above, whoever it is, right? Who created this system to continue to divide. You know what I mean? And then if we start seeing, okay, now this group is starting to gain some mobility. They're starting to gain some, oh, wait, what are we going to do? Let's bomb their Black Wall Street. Let's get rid of their, what is the strongest thing with any family? It's the family unit. Right. Like, you have to be together, right? Yeah. Okay. We're going to start incarcerating your men because we threw in drugs and all that. Now we're going to bring in our social system, exactly what you're saying, and say, hey, no men can be in here. So that creates, what I'm saying is that that's the difference between Nigerians and people who live here.
I agree. I wasn't saying that.
And so all I'm saying is that, like, we understand it, right? But all it would take, and we talk about voices, right? We talk about who has a bigger voice. All it would take is for President Trump to get up and say those things and just be like, hey, look, historically we've gotten it wrong, right? This is not about police, but when you have all these problems and these numbers, now you can throw police in and you can justify the police any way you want to once you throw these numbers in. But without these numbers,
I don't get overly political of today's thing, but
well, I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying, we're talking about LeBron James. Why can't we talk about President Trump? I'm not being negative.
But Trump did acknowledge the fact that how drugs have disproportionately affect the black community, and he's letting people out of jail, realizing that.
But he's one at a time. There's a lot more.
No, it's been a lot. It's not just one. It's been tons. Okay. Because what he's doing is he said, again, I'm not trying to say I'm more one way or the other. But in this fact, the fact is that Trump has said that, look, it was wrong what they did. By the way, it was the Clinton.
That's why I don't do Democrat Republican. I told you that already.
But these hyper arrest rates happen in the black community over drugs, And Trump has realized that that's wrong, and they've been letting a lot of people out that had those
offenses.
3 strike things
For
and
drugs,
everything, for drugs,
Yeah.
and that was nonviolent. Yeah, they're letting, that's been going on
and
for
that's
the past
good.
years.
And I know that he's been doing it, and the only reason why I say not that many is because you just don't see it. And I don't go out and look for it and research it myself.
So
either,
remember when we were talking back before where they were saying, you know how they did the thing with the reefer madness, or they were showing blah blah blah. That happens. That this is what happens when you brainwash a society. So they do that now with policing. You're only going to see the video of the white officer. You're going to see that, and they're going to shove that down to the point where people feel like, oh, it's happening every day, everywhere. Right. So
and also
that's brainwashing.
And also, it's the same thing happens on the other side.
Oh, definitely.
But that's the important thing. That's what we need to understand is like, yes, that's why I try to get officers to understand. Hey, look, the same way that you feel like the media and everybody else is brainwashing everybody to believe one thing about you is the same thing that I feel like as a black person or even as a person of color or as an immigrant or anybody else, they feel like they're being brainwashed that way as well. Why? Because unless you are somebody like the people who actually like ask me questions and talk, they know because they've sat in on something when I've talked about policing, or they know that there's a broader understanding of what they're being fed, and they want to get the information from me on this side, right? And so that's the same thing I'm getting as police. I have police officers asking me about the community and like the information being fed. And so the problem that I have, like even going back to BLM with that, and I've always said this, like I don't agree with what they're talking about, like with their actual points. However, if they had somebody in there that kind of understood all sides, they could break it down and it could still be super highly effective, right? To the point where we're already doing all of the work in the community. It just needs to be on a more broader scale nationally, right?
So to go back to when you're saying about in the 60s and how bad it was 60s and 70s, right? I think we should look into the past and we can see where communities went and what happened. One of the things that happened was back the police hatred of today in the 70s was anti-military, right? Yeah. Okay, so then going into the 70s, Army, Navy, they were having a hard time recruiting people.
That's right.
Okay.
After Vietnam.
They started to push ROTC. Well, we had ROTC, but they started to say, how can we get more officers of different color and that sort of thing. We wanted to diversify our officer ranks, which is great, right? And they were, and just across the country, they're like, oh, we're not having enough people. So they started to come up with these ROTC scholarships. So for ROTC, what they were able to do is they started to build back into the communities where people were like, oh, my son can go to college and he's going to become an officer and everything else. And we saw the ranks swell. We see minorities, and I'm a product of it. Right? I went through ROTC. I was an officer in the Army.
That's really good.
You got the information, you got the understanding of what's going on. Yeah.
In the communities today, right? I truly believe we need to do an ROTC-like version of policing in the colleges, right? Yeah. Even with a junior ROTC policing thing in the high schools, so you can progress all the way through. The reason why I say this is the number one place where we need officers is at the patrol level. We don't need people really to be police officers for 23 years, right? So if we say, hey, I'll pay for your college, right? You come on over here and you be a police officer for about 6 years, right? You do your time. When you're done, you'll be about 28, 29 years old, highly marketable, right? You could go to business, you could go anywhere, teach, you could do anything, right? You're gonna be a leader. And again, the way the military did it is when you leave college and you're starting out in lower management. Same thing. Every police officer should be viewed as a long-term project planner, as a lower level management, right? They're managing their district, right? Not like a private, not like a menial thing. You are a leader in this community. When that person first comes out, that officer should be introduced to his community, to his district, and become a part of his community. If you make smaller districts, right now you can have more officers. You don't have to worry about the pensions and everything else. If you take a part of this program, that first 6 years, that's part of your college. So that doesn't go to your pension. If you want to make a career of it, then you could do 20 years after that, and then that'll get you your pension. Okay, so the cities don't have to worry about that big bulk, but they can get a big increase in officers on the street. And these are management. They can have smaller districts. They can know their people, and they can get those resources just a lot where you were saying. I need to. Now you're going to be educated, right?
Yeah.
In these 4 years of college, you're going to be taught. These are the resources. This is philosophy.
Yeah.
You're gonna understand the difference between utilitarianism and Kantian, and understand how to do discretion and all these things that we want our officers that they should understand. But I had to learn on my own. Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we'll have 4 years. You're gonna have fit officers. I'm the last one to talk about being fit, but you're gonna have
Me too, though.
No, come on now.
he's a football star, but you're gonna have 4 years. That officer's gonna come out. He's gonna be young. He's gonna be fit.
Yeah.
Right. He's gonna be able to defend himself. He'll have 4 years of training in defensive tactics. This way, what sometimes does happen, and police don't want to admit it, but sometimes what happens is an officer is not secure enough in his skills to be able to maintain somebody and everything else, and the situation gets above what that officer can handle, and then they go into higher weaponry and everything else. All right, so you get 4 years where you're gonna train people up that by the time they get out there, they're gonna be comfortable with themselves. They're gonna know how to defend themselves. They're gonna know how to defend the community. They're gonna understand community relations. They're gonna represent their community. Right? Because again, it's not that black people can't go to college. Black people go to college, but when they go to college, they leave the neighborhood. So let's keep our smart people. Let's keep them in the community. They can represent. They can live in the community. You know, that these whole things. And I think that is truly the advancement, the change, and the next policing era.
Yeah.
So we've been through 3 policing eras. That really should be the next policing era, where we have educated, young, smart. We want the captains of our football teams. We want the companions out there.
So if I had a time machine, let me tell you what, I would join that program tomorrow. Honestly, because as a male raised in a single home without a father, I needed that kind of leadership and challenge in my life, in those days. And that would have offered me a greater opportunity that would come earlier than later in my life. It came, thank God, but it would have been so much better to have something like that available to me in those days. So guys, I know we can talk on this subject matter forever, because there's never there's so many different ways to approach this and trying to find solutions. So just give me a closing perspective of some hope that we can build from and leave.
Man, I'll go. Just everything we're talking about. I've spent the last month probably just having conversations, panels, town halls. I think the biggest hope is that people are starting to understand what's going on. As a police officer, there's hope that I know, even just what you were just talking about, people want that. People are asking, hey, why do we not have like an ROTC for police in our school? Or I had a principal ask me, how can we get something started like that? So there's a lot of things in our department that we're doing, but there's a lot that we can do better. And so that's where my hope is because I know that the community, there's a vast majority of the community that is not saying abolish. They're not saying take funds away. They're saying, hey, we want you guys to be professional, the best trained, and we want our kids to be able to experience it as well and not be afraid of the police and afraid that they can do, say, handle us however they want to and still be able to be a police officer later on. So there's some things that we can fix, but there's also a lot of hope that the community does want us out there. But they want us to be more professional and they want it to be accountable across the board.
Perfect. I like that so much.
And to jump on that. Also, I think the hope is that what do we have people out there protesting right now? They want justice, right? So while people may be misinformed, we don't have a whole lot of people out there saying we want to kill people. We hate this or anything else. It's more about we want justice and everything else. So I think that it's perfect for education. We need to educate people, and I think that can happen. I think the majority of the people are not even the ones protesting. The majority of the people, I think, are even keeled and in the middle. It's just that they're surrounded with life and everything else. But I think that the discussions are starting to happen with the majority. And those discussions, I think, are going to end in an understanding that we need police. but we need our police to be professional. And I think that we're on the cusp of a new era of policing, and I think that that's going to happen.
That's so good, guys. And I just believe that having this dialogue, listening to you, officer, about your perspective, it's so important, and it really helps me understand another point of view. And that's what it comes down to. I think as Americans, as citizens, we all have a point of view, and we ought to be willing to share that point of view. And sometimes it might not be what you want to hear, but it's important to listen and then have that dialogue. And ultimately, it's about empowerment and education and equipping. What it comes down to, for the next generation of policing, and really just as people in a great nation. I love this country. I thank God that I was born on this side of the border, because my grandma was on the other side of the border. And so I love this nation. I know there's no perfect nation, but I'll take this one over any other nation in the world.
Yes.
So I want to thank both of you guys for your time and for your expertise and for your service to our communities. And God bless you and your families. Thank you, guys.
No,
I appreciate it.